It was in 2016, shortly after the release of Batman v Superman, that The Batman would be announced. Directed by Ben Affleck, who would also star in the film as the titular superhero opposite Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. This would be a story that would advance the DC Extended Universe and the story of Ben Affleck's Batman, who featured in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And the story would feature Deathstroke, now enlightened to Batman's secret identity, going out of his way to destroy Bruce Wayne's very existence, and would feature the deaths of various notable Batman characters, such as Jim Gordon and Alfred Pennyworth, portrayed by J.K. Simmons and Jeremy Irons respectively. However, the production changed a lot over time. It was announced in early 2017 that Ben Affleck would no longer direct the film, stating that he lacked the confidence to both play the role of Batman and direct the film to the standard that he felt the fans deserved. However, he would remain attached to the project in the role as Batman. It was in February of 2017 that Matt Reeves was announced as the new director for The Batman. However, the production evolved further from there. Before working on The Batman, Ben Affleck would be a major part of the Justice League film, a film with an incredibly troubled production history and diminishing returns at the box office. And it was at this point that Ben Affleck decided he wanted to step down from the role as Batman. Warner Brothers were now naturally under a lot of pressure. They not only needed a new Batman, Matt Reeves insisted on writing his very own script for this film, and wanted to create a new Batman separate from the DC's established extended universe. And thus, a new Batman was born. I can understand why Matt Reeves wanted to distance himself away from the DC Extended Universe. There was definitely a lot of uncertainty from Warner Brothers as to where this universe would be going, and it's a pretty difficult environment for filmmakers to work in when the top down don't really know what they actually want to achieve from this cinematic universe business model. The Justice League movie would feature teases of the story to come for Ben Affleck's version of the Batman. However, they were cut out and can now be viewed in Zack Snyder's Justice League, the newly restored original cut that was made available in 2021. And we get that tease of Deathstroke uncovering Bruce Wayne's secret identity. With that tease cut out of the original 2017 release though, it's hard to tell what they necessarily would have done with the Ben Affleck Batman film. So with the DC Extended Universe almost perpetually in a state of panic, yeah, I fully get why Matt Reeves wanted to distance himself from that. Not only that though, Ben Affleck's take on Batman was ultimately controversial, as Batman v Superman told the story of a Batman that had strayed way too far from the path he originally set out on. He played a Batman that was willing to kill, before having his faith restored by Superman at the end of the film. As much as I like Snyder's take on Batman, I can understand why that's a difficult ballpark for a filmmaker to tell a new Batman story within. And Snyder's Batman definitely had a much shorter shelf life because of it. Which was fair, as they did intend to kill him off in the third Justice League movie, but what Matt Reeves wanted was the opportunity to tell his very own Batman story. Not obligated to use certain villains, not obligated to use a Batman that has killed before, and I think it's quite a stark juxtaposition as well, in that the original film we were going to get was very much the Batman at the end of his tether, the Batman who's lost Alfred and Jim Gordon, a Batman who has taken lives before, whereas the film we're actually getting in the end is going to be a fresh, brand new Batman. I think Matt Reeves was the perfect choice for a Batman film. He's a known cinephile that always wants to go above and beyond with narrative storytelling, and does a fantastic job at weaving action in there. He doesn't do things in an overly fast-paced manner, and has a very raw style as exhibited in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. A style that feels like a marriage made in heaven when it comes to Batman. And going by the trailers and the promotional material, this hasn't disappointed. This is undeniably a Matt Reeves film. Throughout these trailers and images, there's an uncompromising sense of atmosphere to Gotham City, as it bears down on our fresh-faced new Dark Knight. The visuals feel shadowy and claustrophobic. It looks raw, it looks atmospheric, it looks unpolished, it looks grimy, and I think the director of photography, Greg Fraser, really brought this to life well. Like with pretty much every Batman film to date though, the casting has proven controversial, especially in the early days before we got like a trailer or a first look at these characters. Robert Pattinson would be the new Bruce Wayne going forward, and would be playing a younger, more fresh-faced, more inexperienced Batman than his predecessor Ben Affleck, a Batman who was very much closer to the end of his journey than he was the beginning. Now, of course, there did come a stigma with this, with a lot of Batman fans pointing out that Robert Pattinson had formerly starred in the controversial Twilight Saga film adaptations. I think when it comes to casting new Batmen, I think Batman fans tend to forget that these people are actors, they are versatile, and Robert Pattinson was never going to be playing Batman in the same way that he played Edward Cullen, just as Michael Keaton didn't play Batman in the same way that he played Beetlejuice, and in the same way that Ben Affleck played Batman in a different way to how he had played, say, Larry Jiggly. And not to mention, if you did hate the Twilight films, well, Robert Pattinson is right there with you. Honestly, I was just enthusiastic to see Robert Pattinson become more of a household name for his performance in The Batman, as while he's delivered some powerhouse performances in such films as The Lighthouse and Devil All the Time, he was still generally known more as Edward Cullen, unfortunately, and it can be hard to kind of shake off that kind of stigma. A great way of doing that is to play such a household name as the Batman, and I think this is what is going to change the perspective of the skeptics when it comes to Robert Pattinson's acting chops. But not to mention, I can certainly see the vision as well. Yes, he is a very versatile actor, but as well as that, Robert Pattinson has a very steely, yet very expressive face, which I feel could portray a lot more humanity behind the cowl than the more bestial appearances of previous Batmen. At a time when there were purely just rumors and rumblings of Robert Pattinson playing the new Batman, I recall Boss Logic made a mock-up artwork of Robert Pattinson as a very theoretical Bruce Wayne. And I had to say, he certainly looked the part. Not only that, he's got that really square jawline that is needed for a Batman. However, once we got our first look at Bruce Wayne in this film, it appears that the unconventional casting decision of Robert Pattinson is playing an unconventional Bruce Wayne to a certain extent. Less the polished billionaire playboy, more a traumatized reclusive character. Someone that has yet to develop his public face. Someone who is yet to find the balance between Bruce and the Bat. Then there was the casting of Zoë Kravitz as Selina Kyle. Now the fun thing here is that this isn't actually the first time that Zoë Kravitz has played Catwoman, as she provided the voice of the Lego Catwoman in the Lego Batman movie. And while she was in that very little, she did a fine job in that version of the role. But not only that, she does look the part for Catwoman as well. So I think that Zoë Kravitz was a really good choice for this role. Then there's Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon. And yes, I will address the obvious. This is the first time a person of color has been cast as Commissioner Jim Gordon, but that doesn't mean he looks any less like Jim Gordon does in the comic books, because goddamn does this guy have the likeness. Really goes to show how trivial the color of one's skin is. But again, I thought he was a great casting choice. He's got great acting ability. Honestly, less unconventional of a choice for Jim Gordon than Robert Pattinson was for Batman. It was pretty easy for me to see the potential here. Andy Serkis was cast as the new Alfred. Once again, quite an unconventional take. However, not unsurprising, as Andy Serkis does have a history working with Matt Reeves doing the motion capture for the apes in the Planet of the Apes films. Serkis probably known for his motion capture acting, however, his more traditional performances outside of the motion capture realm are also fantastic. And I feel like Serkis' Alfred will be more in line with the more modern depiction of Alfred as seen in the show Gotham, where he's more ex-SAS than your sort of cuddly, lovable butler stereotype. Very little is seen of him in the promotional material, so it does make me wonder how involved he's going to be in this film. But still, like with Robert Pattinson, it's an unconventional casting choice, but one I can absolutely see. Moving over to the villains, we have Paul Dano as the Riddler, and yeah, that's pretty obvious. I can totally see that. I could totally see him playing this smug young smartass, but I could also totally see him getting beaten up by Batman, I think Prisoners is kind of what I thank for that. Then there's Colin Farrell as the Penguin, and what? But okay, I figured they could do something more along the realm of the Batman Telltale take on the Penguin, and Jesus Christ, is that Colin Farrell? Yeah, he looks pretty damn unrecognizable in his Penguin makeup. Interesting to cast Colin Farrell in a role that's like totally out there like this. But it is nice to see this film's commitment to the character of the Penguin rather than just showing off who they got cast in the role. I think it's really awesome to make an actor completely unrecognizable and see just how far they can take that role away from who they actually are. And then there's John Turturro cast as Carmine Falcone. I know John Turturro as Jesus from The Big Lebowski, and it's really cool to see him cast in a Batman film, and I think that he's a good fit for the role. Little is known about his role in this film, but I guess we'll see when I'm in the theater, won't we? I think the casting of this film has been really inspired. And just from the casting alone, I can see the vision. If I hadn't seen the trailers or anything like that, I'd still kind of just be hyped to see these actors in these roles. The vision's definitely there, and it kind of feels like quintessential Batman casting, even if it goes a little unconventional. It's daring, it's a little risky in places, but I think it's a fantastic cast. It's safe to say that Matt Reeves' vision for the Batman is a distinctive one, with incredibly well thought out backgrounds for these many different characters, particularly Bruce Wayne and the Riddler. How do I know this before the film? Because I read the prequel novel that came out before the Batman, which is all about Bruce's adolescent years as an orphan, and how the Batman came to be. As the film itself will be skipping the origin story, which is a nice change of pace. This Batman is self-made, but there's no distinct line between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Yes, there's a secret identity, but the two characters are very, very alike. Bruce is young and inexperienced, and he's kind of using Batman as a means to get his internalized anger and trauma out. But at what point does the violence become excessive? Bruce Wayne is also of course part of Gotham's elite, being the wealthiest person in the city, and the Riddler is someone that wants to uproot the elites, the rich and the powerful and the corrupt, as Gotham is a city drenched in corruption, and a large part of that corruption linking back to the Waynes, which is something that's been surprisingly unexplored on film, with the key exception being Joker 2019. This is the first time we're really seeing the potential corruption of the Waynes fold into a Batman film, however. Not a huge amount is known about this revelation though, so I don't really know exactly where it's going to go. It might turn out that it was nothing after all. But there definitely seem to be teases that Bruce Wayne is a part of Gotham's corruption and that this could link back to his parents. The kinds of people the Riddler is taking down are politicians like the mayor of Gotham. So the Riddler's not really that interested in innocence as far as I know. Which I guess in many ways makes him just like another form of vigilante in a way, where I guess we'll see kind of the blurred line between Batman and the Riddler in this. And in that case, this film is chock full of vigilantes, as we also have Selina Kyle, who does appear to be a big part of this film, as a lot of the marketing is centered on kind of the Bat and the Cat, this duo working together. But I think what I especially like about the vision here is that this appears to be a noir detective story. Now, we have seen little bits and pieces of Detective Batman in live action in the past. However, they never truly centered on him being the world's greatest detective. And I think that is what excites me so much about this film. If we look back at the Batmans of the past, the Batman that did the most detective stuff was definitely Adam West, as Michael Keaton would be more focused on the theatrics of the Batman. The Christian Bale version was more focused on Batman as a vigilante, and the Ben Affleck version, while it did have a little bit of detective stuff in Batman v Superman, he was generally more of a brawler. With the Batman, we're definitely seeing brawler-y aspects of Batman in the trailers when he's beating up thugs, and we're definitely seeing that vigilanticism play into things as well. But we are also getting the detective Batman, which I think was the perfect move going forward, was to make a Batman film that kind of separates itself from the genre of previous Batman films and goes more in the direction of being a detective genre piece, which I guess means that this will be a little less action focused, a little more mystery focused. And I am A-okay with that, and I think the Riddler is the perfect villain for the job. I'm hoping that we'll see lots of Batman and Gordon working together to try and uncover the Riddler's secret plot, and it's nice to see that we're finally getting that sort of world's greatest detective Batman. It also appears that there's going to be something of an internal narration for Bruce Wayne as well, much like your typical noir film. I think that sort of dip into the noir genre is really going to separate this from the previous Batman films and from other superhero films. But what I like about this as well is it does feel like the culmination of all of the live action Batman. Like, previous versions of Batman have focused on very specific aspects of the character, and I think that this one looks to be a much more all-encompassing Batman, a much more comprehensive Batman, which in many ways makes this the Batman movie I've been waiting for a very long time now. The last time a Batman film was this kind of grounded in reality was the Christopher Nolan Batman films, where Bruce Wayne had Lucius Fox working for him, making him all kinds of different gadgets, which all had a very polished contemporary look to them. I don't know whether or not Lucius Fox will be appearing in any capacity in the upcoming Batman. However, it does appear that Bruce Wayne is making all of his tech himself this time, with the prequel novel featuring the origins of the Batmobile and Bruce Wayne as kind of a petrolhead car enthusiast. Everything here looks really practical and home sourced though, which I think goes really well with that very unpolished sort of atmosphere of the overall visuals that they're going for. Think of it like this. This is the opposite of the MCU Spider-Man. Now, I love the MCU Spider-Man, and it has its place, but it's exciting to see something so on the opposite end of the spectrum, where with the MCU Spider-Man, everything's so polished and theatrical that they literally will CGI any creases out of the costume. Then we have the Robert Pattinson Batsuit, which is the antithesis to that. As you can see, all of the different seam lines running throughout this costume, the seams around the leather of the cowl, the way the armor plating is layered and how it doesn't always perfectly line up, the laces holding together his trousers. It appears to be very much sort of a military sort of combat suit that Bruce Wayne is wearing here. And it definitely looks like something that Bruce sourced himself. But what I love about this is that while it's got all of those aspects and this really distinct visual language, I really love the fact that this still fully resembles the classic Batman. He's not wearing an all-black splunking suit. This is still the grey and black classic Batman. There's even little orangey rusty accents around the bat symbol and the belt, which feel like little nods to the more garish yellow parts of the Batsuit in the comics. It's nice to see these there and done in a practical sense, as opposed to just keeping this costume completely monotone. Then there's Selina Kyle's catsuit, which is very much sort of the typical cat burglar sort of costume, being a black jumpsuit, but what I like is how her Catwoman mask appears to be sort of a knitted woolen material, and it kind of almost like the ear shape of the cat ears almost appears to be like accidental in a way. Like that's just where the thick seams are. While it definitely appears to be a very homemade look, it still thoroughly resembles Catwoman. A massive surprise though was of course the Penguin. I did not expect them to go down this very Arkham series-esque look for the Penguin when they cast Colin Farrell. Like I said earlier, it's nice to see that commitment to the character. Perhaps the biggest departure from what I expected is the Riddler. You can fairly easily adapt that sort of classic Riddler suit and tie look into live action, just make the green a little less garish, take away the question marks, and you can still kind of achieve that overall look, but they have gone in a very different direction. With this being more sort of a mystery film, they've decided to go down a more Zodiac Killer inspired look for the Riddler himself. Also changing up the Riddler's iconic question mark insignia to have more like sort of the crosshairs of a gun around it. The Riddler is now wearing sort of a camo green military jacket and a military mask with clear frame glasses over it. It's a very new, iconic reimagining of the Riddler, and I think this is a really nice distinctive look. I guess I would be a little more taken aback by the fact that this is such a huge departure from the comic book look, were it not for the fact that we very much got the comic book Riddler in the Gotham TV series shortly before. But they've kept the question mark insignia and they've kept the green color scheme, so it still still very much has a lot of those hallmark Riddler traits, it's just interpreted in a very unique new way that fits this film. Once again, in keeping with the sort of homemade visual language that they're going for. And that's what I really like about this, is it has its own very distinct visual language, which is very, very Matt Reeves, but yet it still looks like the comic booky sort of Batman as well. I'd say if I would compare Matt Reeves' Batman aesthetic to anything, I'd probably say it would be more like Lee Bermejo's art style. Obviously still different, but I do get the feeling that there was some inspiration from Lee Bermejo, where, say, Zack Snyder's was more inspired by Jim Lee. And like I mentioned before, the Batmobile is a kitted out modded muscle car, and I'm just so grateful that we're finally back to the Batmobile actually being a car rather than being like a tank or a military armored vehicle. I can't wait to see this thing in action. Once again, it has that very realistic, practical, homemade sort of look to it, but at the same time, it still looks like the Batmobile has that sleek form factor and the sort of the appearance of the fins at the back. I love the way this film looks. It is the antithesis to the very polished look that we've come to expect from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And don't get me wrong, I love that, but I love that this is so far in the opposite direction as well. There's room for both styles. The composer for this film is Michael Giacchino, who has become more and more prolific in the recent years. Probably best known for his work in Pixar films such as The Incredibles and Ratatouille, the guy can make a very distinct theme music with a very distinct style. He's also worked on Doctor Strange and the MCU Spider-Man films, and let me just say, his take on the Batman theme is bloody iconic. It's simple, it's a little understated, which I really like. It's a little softer than your typical Batman fanfare. And I like that, and I'm guessing this just based on listening to the soundtrack, but I'm guessing that there's a part of this which is like the Batman theme and a part of this that is the Bruce Wayne theme. Either that or it's Hope and Vengeance, I'm not sure. But there's a really hopeful swell in there which I think is absolutely gorgeous. The best example of this is, I think, the final track, which is All's Well That Ends Farewell. It's beautiful. The Riddler and Catwoman also have really distinct themes, and it definitely gives kind of a feel of like a modern Batman the Animated Series. He's definitely captured sort of the same sense of iconography within his music as Shirley Walker did back in the 1990s. And I think, yeah, like just through listening to the soundtrack alone, I guess I'll have to see how it sounds in the film, but it may sound like recency bias, but this might just be my favorite Batman soundtrack to date, at least in live action. It's going to take a lot to beat Shirley Walker's iconic score for Mask of the Phantasm. So, on a whole, I'm really, really stoked. I get the feeling some people are going to call me a shill for this film or something, but here's the thing, I haven't bloody seen it yet. I might come out of the theater and say it's rubbish. I doubt it though. I really, really doubt it. Throughout the ages in live action, it feels like we've kind of had Batman but with a twist. We've had Burton's Batman, which is a very sort of twisted, dark and gothic take on the character. Nolan's very contemporary and grounded take. Snyder's very mythical and intense take. And it feels like Matt Reeves is really bringing us an all-encompassing Batman film. Dare I say, the definitive Batman? Not yet, but we'll see when I see the film. At the same time, it might be a little unfair to call it definitive Batman, I don't know. But it definitely seems like we're getting at the very least the quintessential Batman. Now, I know some of you guys might be saying, that sounds like recency bias, but let me just say this. Quintessential doesn't necessarily mean best. While this is shaping up to be the quintessential Batman film, if, you know, the trailers and such are anything to go by, I could still walk out of this film saying I prefer Burton's take. I could still be saying, oh, I like Batman Returns better. Maybe perfectly incorporating all aspects of this comic book character and adapting them like this doesn't result in the best movie. Maybe my priorities are elsewhere, I don't know. But right now, with everything we've seen, with all of the different ingredients that are in here, the detective stuff, the brawler stuff, that sort of rage that Batman has, the vigilanticism, this definitely feels like it is shaping up to be a quintessential early Batman tale, and I cannot wait to see it. So, I'm going to be seeing the midnight screening. I'm going to be seeing it on, do I say it's the Friday or the Thursdays? Technically it's the Friday, but I'll be going out into town on the Thursday. And I'll be letting you know my thoughts when I see it then. So until then, guys, well, yeah, I'm gonna go watch the Batman. I'll see you soon. So what do you guys think? If you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit that big, beautiful subscribe button. And of course, in the description below are links to different social media feeds, including the Patreon. If you're feeling extra generous, like the following people, who are JK Strife, Marcus Ward, Sirius the Skeptic, Biotin Arts, Mr. SP, David 20 Covers, Sergio, John Comey, Shodin, George is Lost, Legendary Ray Ray, Cheesemaster769, Adam Myers, and Fayalan Schwarzentraub. Thank you guys, you are the best of the best, but as for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.